Olugito Odiomi Ops. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you so much for the moment when you will, when I can borrow your ear a little bit. I have these 3 questions. Do they have a right to a past? Do they have a right to a presence? Do they have a right to a future? And one of the main questions is that somehow we Samis end up emphasizing rights. And rights are important as they define the gears of interaction between contractual partners, members in a family, different companies, the government and its citizens, and so on. So in that respect, it's understandable and it's good that our emphasis oftentimes is on rights. But when we then think in our practical lives, that when do we start to speak about rights, like family rights, who shall have the house and who shall have the car, who has the right to the car, who takes the house, and who shall have custody over the children. That occurs when a relationship starts to soar up, sort of. And that is also the case when a contractual relationship is soared up. Then the emphasis becomes on what are the rights. So in our context, because this is a joint situation that we are in with the Scandinavian and also with the Russian state and the Samis. And our situation is that we have inherited a situation. And then we are, our obligation is to build a civilization and to maintain a civilization. And in a civilization, rights are one element that is important. But as important is the atmosphere that we speak in. So what we need to get on terms on is that how shall we deal with the situation that we have inherited. For the Samis part, it is to administer different types of traumas that we have had from this crash that our culture has been crushed against. So that is the Sami part. Don't cry too much. Stand up and be positive and keep walking. For the Swedish side, it is how to meet a responsibility, a historic responsibility and a collective responsibility. And what's characteristic with that type of responsibility is that the persons who are to act upon this responsibility haven't done the acts that actualizes this responsibility. And that is one of the big challenges for civilizations. How civilizations shall manage to format collective responsibility and historical responsibility in ways that will give us productive atmospheres, so that the Samis and the Swedes and the Norwegians, that we can invent things together and give as good a society to the generations to come as we possibly can. So therefore we need to have a kind of emphasis that what can we do with our societies so that the rights are important. They are important, but that we shouldn't be talking about rights. That we should be in a situation like harmonic contractual partners. The thing that they talk least about is what is in their contracts, because the interaction is smooth and productive most of the times. So if we could have a joint goal with the Swedish society, the Sami society, that let's cheer up and let's try to make an atmosphere that is productive, where inventions can flourish, where democracy thrives, where we eat the fruits of the rule of law. So that could be one goal that we have. In order to make it to that goal, then we have to look back. We have to look at our past. And that is a very challenging thing, because there we meet a lot of the trauma, the flashbacks. We meet the phenomena of intergenerational traumas, how they move, and we are one of the people who has that. We have that as our historical situation, that maybe through us, through our work with intergenerational trauma, the insights on that phenomenon will be helpful for the rest of the world. For the Swedish side, the challenge is also to meet, to be a good perpetrator, to have the strength to face the historical realities that have been, to look at the Rasbiologiska Institutet and the practices that took place there, to look at the practice of nomadskolan and Lapp ska vara Lapp, and it is painful. It is painful because we see how much states invest in having both a good image and a good self-image. Look at all the investments that is done to sports, for example, where the main purpose is namely that, the image and the self-image. So that is a task, to have a right to the past, that the Sami shall have the right to a past in that respect, that we shall hear what our records are. We shall be able to recall our stories, to retrieve our songs, and thereby go through the healing process of an indigenous people who has been crunched. And for the Swedish side, it will be the challenge to meet, to look it into the eye, the historical responsibility and the historical responsibility. Then we have the situation that we live here and now. And therefore we have to have a right to be here. For the Swedish side, the challenge is that most of the population lives in what I call the dark, big ignorance. That they don't know anything about Sami history. They don't know anything about Sami culture. They don't know about the current Sami society. So their right to information is violated. So in that respect, they end up as cultural analphabets. And we meet this cultural analphabetism as a kind of shame, that when you, from a Sami perspective, you meet that when you meet a Swedish judge and you are litigating a Sami case, then the ignorance of that poor individual appears. And when you meet this person as a newly elected minister, for example, and you appear as a Sami, and this poor person doesn't know anything about and needs to be schooled about the Sami culture. And that applies to the whole Swedish society. And that is a right that has been violated from them. Because what they have been exposed to in a legal setting, we have this that in the court you shall tell the truth and nothing but the whole truth, and you shall not omit anything. So if you know some information that could be relevant for the case, you have to tell it. The schools should also have done that to their children over generations. The sin that is committed is that information has been omitted for them, and the Swedish individuals are then shameful analphabets, and they don't deserve that. On the Sami side, we meet this right to a presence in the form of that we have to struggle to be from Hamlet. But the big question is to be or not to be. Should the Sami culture remain or should it disappear? Should this and that Sami language remain or should it disappear? So in that respect, we are a Hamletian people. And we are also a Hamletian people in another respect. And that is that many Samis have escaped from the culture. And then they haven't told their own people about that. So we have a lot of mini hamlets around, thinking that there is something rotten in the state, and then they trace their culture back to their home, and we see a lot of these journeys, and sometimes these journeys they create a lot of pain in families, because some members of the families are interested to hide the identity, and others are interested to expose that, and then the pain comes into the family, and that pain shouldn't be there. That pain should be structured in other forums. So it shouldn't be privatized as family conflicts, as it oftentimes appear. So the main question that should be where we should head is that it should be obvious that the Samis are here to stay, and we shall thrive together, and we shall create a good and flourishing society. I think that the most important human right is the right to have hopes and dreams. That we shall be able to fantasize what will happen in the future with our societies, our cultures. To manage to that right, the right to have hopes and dreams, is that for some reason Sami culture has ended up as one of the very few defenders of something extremely precious in our time, and that is wilderness. Wilderness is the most expensive mineral for the future, because all the planet is destroyed everywhere. So we are trying to defend something that is very, very precious for the future. Not only the future of our own population, that there can be activity in the wilderness, that the wilderness doesn't necessarily have to become a museum where nothing happens, that there can be human activity and culture in the wilderness. And that is a very important question in this right to a future, to have a future. And then the right to a future also necessarily have to address in a practical sense to what our generations to come shall know and shall master and manage. And that means that they have to both have the right to a past, to a present, and a future. And their right to a future consists of that you give them training in their own language, so that words can come from the heart. Imagine what power that can be, lie in that, not only for the Sámi people, but for the whole Nordic societies, that we cultivate the Sami languages and the Sami culture, that we can have a future that is based on tradition, rooted in tradition, solidly rooted in tradition, but where innovation can flourish, and where we can have this approach to life that that we are going ahead, that we are not standing against a wall and trying to defend and fight for our existence. So we have a problem of communication, a challenge of communication. Because if we manage to communicate to the Swedish society, to the Norwegian society, to the Finnish society, that we will all benefit from a situation where we don't have to emphasize on this or that right, but where we shall emphasize that how shall we get a good atmosphere together? Because if we manage to create that as a goal, that as our common goal, the GA goal, good atmosphere, GA, that is where we want to arrive. So then I think that we could manage to take steps where we don't have to shame each other for things that have been done and not been done. So therefore I think that even if we never shall forget issues of rights, because when rights are configured in good way, that they have good design, then they also are very functional as gears in the engine that runs. But what I want is that we shall get out of this stage where we are the Hamletian people, because we can give so much color, song, poetry, innovation, sayings to not only our neighboring people, but to our whole surroundings. So, and we can do that with being present in the most precious mineral that is, and that is wilderness. Thank you so much for your kind attention.